Welcome to Creation versus Evolution, Topic 10. How did the Grand Canyon really form? Old Earth theories teach that the rock layers of the Grand Canyon were laid down a particle at a time over hundreds of millions of years, and that the Great Canyon itself was later gradually carved out by the Colorado River over about a 2 million year period. If this is true, then the biblical story of creation, which we've already seen dates only to a few thousand years ago, is impossible. But does this gradual carving out of the Grand Canyon by the Colorado River really fit the evidence? Let's briefly examine that theory, as well as the more recent biblical creationist theory that not only fits the geological evidence, but the biblical time frame as well. After all, if it did take millions of years for the Grand Canyon to form, then the biblical story of creation is in error. Now, again, remember, anytime you study events from the past, you're studying in the realm of historical science, not operational science, which means assumptions must be made. And if your beginning assumptions are wrong, then your conclusion will be wrong as well. Having said this, it is significant to note that the formation of the Grand Canyon may not completely fit into historical science. Why? Because the native Indians, whose ancestors lived in this remote canyons for centuries before white settlers arrived, passed down from one generation to the next the eyewitness accounts of approximately a time about 1,000 years ago when mighty floodwaters sculpted out the Great Canyon. These eyewitness accounts, if they are true, place the formation of the canyon into the category of operational science because it was witnessed by one or more of their five senses. But for argument's sake, let's pretend that these eyewitness accounts are not true and study the canyon's formation solely based on historical science. Okay, first of all, the traditional theory that the rock layers were laid down over hundreds of millions of years doesn't fit the evidence. Mike Ord, MS Atmospheric Science, writes that, and this is the quote, recently dated sedimentary rock just west of the Grand Canyon have forced some evolutionary scientists to postulate that the canyon formed quickly sometime between 1 to 6 million years ago. If the canyon formed rapidly, processes observed today, such as gully washing thunderstorms, seem less likely to have played a major role in carving the Grand Canyon and its side canyons. A catastrophic mechanism for the formation of the Grand Canyon seems more likely, even within the evolutionary model. Within the creation framework, the Grand Canyon originated only several thousand years ago as a direct or indirect result of Noah's flood. So we would expect that thunderstorms and flash floods would have had no effect on the canyon's original formation. Okay, Tom Vell has written a book that has a collection of writings by some very qualified scientists and theologians giving and explaining the new Grand Canyon formation theory. Now, this Grand Canyon book by Tom Vell, if there's any way you can get your hands on this book, it is definitely worth the read. In this book, the scientists examine the theory that a little water over a huge amount of time, they talk about how it does not work, and the alternative is a huge amount of water over a small amount of time. So they look at the original theory and they show how, no, that does not work. And then they look at the theory that a huge amount of water could have produced the Grand Canyon, formed it over a small amount of time. And this is a new and growing theory because many geologists today who, as a result of the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and I was around at that time. I remember I lived several states away, but the volcano, when it erupted, it turned the sky gray. Even where we were at, you could see the haze of the sky, the volcanic ash, when that volcano erupted. But after the eruption of Mount St. Helen, a canyon was formed with the lava, with the lake that was there, the water joined to the lava, with it washing down. And today, there is a small canyon at Mount St. Helen that did not previously exist, which if we had not been here present, if there weren't eyewitness accounts as well as video accounts of the eruption of Mount St. Helen, using the old theory, geologists would have come in and said, oh, well, it took millions of years, for this to wear down like this. And it didn't. In just a few hours' time, the canyon there at Mount St. Helens became a canyon. It was formed. Okay, Gary Parker, his degrees in biology, points out that there's another very, very serious problem concerning the traditional view that was taught for decades, that the Little Water, the Colorado River there, carved out the Grand Canyon. And this is his quote. I love this one. He said, "One thing is for sure, the Colorado River did not do it. The river starts at 12,000 feet up in the Rocky Mountains of western Colorado. By the time it gets to the head of the Grand Canyon, it's at an elevation of only 3,000 feet or so. And that is the problem. The Grand Canyon is definitely not a lowland valley. The north rim of the canyon is over 8,000 feet high. For the Colorado River to carve out the canyon, it would first have had to have hacked its way almost a mile uphill. Water just doesn't do that, especially when there is a means to flow downhill in a different direction. In other words, for the Colorado River to have formed the Grand Canyon, it would have had to have flown, not just flown uphill a mile, it would have flown uphill and hacked out a mile's worth of rock and everything that was included in that in order to form the Grand Canyon. Rivers don't flow uphill. Okay, with the Colorado River formation of the canyon disqualified, is there any evidence that the canyon might have been formed by a huge amount of water over a small amount of time? Yes, there is. Just above the canyon's surface, on the Colorado Plateau, geologists have observed a saucer-shaped basin that appears to have once been a series of huge connecting lakes. Okay, to get a picture of that, that is Lake Michigan times 3. Lake Michigan times 3. This series of lakes might well have been formed by the catastrophic flood of Noah's day. But what we do know was this series of lakes, there's a breach in this series of dried out lakes now. And right at that breach is the beginning of the Grand Canyon. Okay, that's pretty good evidence that it is what created the Grand Canyon. I've got a picture. Black Canyon is what this basin-like bowl looks like. And I've been both to the Grand Canyon and to Black Canyon. And it's amazing when you drive by it. It looks like a dried out lake, huge lake. Like if you were to dry out Lake Michigan 3 times over. That's the appearance that it gives. And the fact that where the breach in that basin type bowl is where the Grand Canyon forms, that is really, really good evidence. Okay, if you live somewhere where you can do an experiment, I want you to try something. Go outside and take your water faucet, your hose, put your finger on the hose where it sprays really, really hard. Put that hose down to the ground and just leave it there. What's going to happen? Well, even if you can't do the experiment, you know what's going to happen. That water, the pressure from the water, is going to dig a hole in your ground. The more water, the more pressure, the bigger the hole. I have no problem imagining that a lake 3 times the size as Lake Michigan could have carved out the Grand Canyon. Okay, another piece of evidence supporting this new argument is located just outside the city of San Diego. Think about it a minute. If a catastrophic event, such as a huge lake, had a breach and the water all drained out of that lake, if it actually happened, wouldn't you expect to find the mud, the rocks, the debris that washed out of that canyon to end up somewhere at the end of the canyon, maybe a huge pile of it? Well, that is exactly what you find at the end of the Grand Canyon, right outside the city of San Diego. There is a strangely unexplainable pile of dirt and rock that's just there. And that dirt and that rock does not match. The mineral content in it does not match the area of San Diego, but it perfectly matches the rock, the mineral, the content that is in the Grand Canyon. So it is a perfect match to the dirt, the soil in the Grand Canyon, but it does not match San Diego. Okay, food for thought. When you visited the Grand Canyon, or if you haven't had a chance to visit the Grand Canyon, if you've watched a documentary on it, were both points of view presented? A small amount of water flowing uphill a mile, carving out the Grand Canyon over millions of years, and a huge amount of water, a catastrophic event, carving it out in a very short period of time. Were both views represented? I would venture to say no. Why not? Why do you think evolutionists try so desperately hard to prevent any view except their own from being presented? Thank you for joining me today.